Hello. Welcome to our sessions on how you can make your work and your life better. We're thrilled to have you here with us today for the magic of habits, routines, and rituals in uncertain times. Today with today's guest, Sharon Danzger. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Sonia.
So let me tell you a few things about Sharon. She's awesome. She is an executive coach with us. She's written a book on productivity. She does large workshops, virtual, and it used to be in person. And she is a swimmer. So lots of fun, interesting things about Sharon. And today, when I asked her, what is on your mind? What do you care about these days? And she said habits, routines, and rituals. So that's what we're going to talk about. Hi.
Awesome.
Why do you care about habits, routines, and rituals?
So I think for me, like when I think about when I was raising kids, there was a lot about how sort of structure and routines was great for kids, right? They kind of know what to expect. And maybe I'm just a big kid, but I really do like to have things that are more routine so that I know what to expect. And maybe part of that is that I really like to feel like I have some control over my life. I mean, we all know that there's only so much we have control over. But I think the idea of routines, habits, and rituals help us to create a sense of control. And particularly now in a pandemic, when there's so much we don't have control over, I feel like it can be really grounding.
Yeah, to have those. So tell me about the benefits specifically of habits, routines, rituals in a pandemic, in times of uncertainty. Why at these times should we reach for these more often?
Sure. So, I mean, even one of the things that's come up with a lot of the people that I've worked with is this issue of now that we're home all the time, how do you know when you're at work, when you're at home? And I'm sure most people have seen the data that we're actually working more hours because we're working from home. And I think
what is
part
it?
of that,
10 to 20% more, something like that, just in the
yes.
Yeah.
So that's a lot more time spent working. I mean, we did get some time back because we're not commuting, but nonetheless, I think it's having some kind of routine that helps us to delineate when we're at work and when we're at home. So, for example, when we were going into an office, there was some kind of morning routine that most people had. And so if you do that morning routine, it's like a signal to your brain, like, oh, now it's time to go to work. And so I've been encouraging people, when you're working from home, still have a morning routine. Get up the same time, get out of your pajamas. You know, if you, even something as little as if you were drinking coffee out of a travel mug on your commute, maybe think about using the travel mug as you walk 3 feet to your desk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so little things that kind of cue your brain that it's time to work. And the same is true, and maybe even more important, and maybe a little more challenging to do, is to have an end of day work routine, right? So you sort of do that final scan of your emails that everything has been addressed that's urgent. You look through your to-do list, and then you plan for the next day. And that's the signal to your brain that, okay, like I'm done working for today, I can close my computer, and I know what to expect when I come to work tomorrow.
Sharon, you coach leaders who are super busy. What are their obstacles to taking on your advice of have a great in-place morning routine and afternoon routine? What are obstacles you're hearing?
I think people think it's harder to do than it is. And they also don't recognize that sometimes they're already doing some of those things.
What are some things people are doing when you start to talk to them?
Oh, well, things that they're doing, like some people might have like a regular morning practice of meditating. They just think that that's what they do. They don't necessarily identify it as part of their routine. Yeah. Eating breakfast, putting on clothes that are not your pajamas, that signal your brain that this is not a Saturday or Sunday where you could stay in your pajamas all day. Of course, the pajama bottoms, we don't really know because everyone's on Zoom. People could be in pajama bottoms, and that's okay. But at least they're not wearing a pajama top, you know? Mm-hmm. So, and then it's sort of exploring for different people what it is for them that helps to trigger their brain as part of their routine. So, you know, I can give you one example. For me, this is sort of a silly thing, and I think this is almost more of a ritual. So for me, the way I distinguish between a routine and a ritual is the ritual is a habit or routine that has a meaning or purpose beyond what you're actually doing. Right? So for me, when I start work, the first thing I do is the New York Times mini crossword. It takes about 30 seconds on a good day, right?
Wow.
And I think this is me firing up my brain. And so I use it as a ritual, and maybe it's a placebo effect, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, this starts up my brain, and now I'm ready to dive into work. So that's just an example of one of the little things that I have. Another example of a ritual would be, you think about the NBA stars when there used to be an NBA that was playing, and when they go to the foul line, most of them have a ritual with how many times they twirl the ball, bounce the ball. That's their ritual that kind of gets them into that zone. So I distinguish that between a routine or a habit because it's more than just what they're doing. There's something beyond what they're doing. There's some kind of meaning or purpose that's attached to the activity.
And that's very personal, like your mini crossword puzzle or somebody's foul line pre-play. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What about the difference between habits and routines?
So I think routines require a little more effort for them to happen. Like you have to put some attention towards it. So I have a routine of writing in a gratitude journal every day. It's been years, and somehow if it were not on my to-do list, there would be days where I would forget. On the other hand, I brush my teeth twice a day, and I don't have to have that on my to-do list. I am going to do it. It is ingrained in my head, right? The same thing with flossing. But sometimes there are routines that can be new and maybe not something you did as a kid that you've introduced as an adult that becomes a habit. So for me, that would be a meditation practice. I started out doing that only about 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now I always start my day with that. And it is habit. I don't have to consciously think, I have to remember to do this.
Isn't that funny? It's a habit. It could have stayed a routine for you, but it actually transitioned. It went into a habit for you.
Yes. I don't know why the gratitude journal has not, to tell you the truth. But I'm going to stick with it. And I'm hoping that one day I'm going to be, wow, like I'm going to remember to do this. I don't have to have it on my to-do list.
So it sounds like the distinction you're really making as a routine is something you still need to kind of remind yourself or have on your to-do list. Otherwise, you naturally would not gravitate towards it or do it, like brushing your teeth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for me, exercise is a routine. And I'm very disciplined about it. But it definitely takes self-regulation. If I'm tired in the morning, getting into a cold pool just doesn't seem that appealing. I'm really happy after I've done it, but it's sometimes hard to get there.
When you've introduced ideas of habits or routines or rituals to people that you're working with, that you're coaching, what are some ways in which they've actually adopted them? What's a success story of working with a habit or routine or ritual?
Sure. So I think the best way to approach it is when it's something that they want to do. So I'm working with somebody now who's preparing for a certification exam, and he wants to be practicing every day. And his goal is to practice an hour or two every day. That's a really big commitment. And so some days he doesn't really have that time. And what I've suggested to him is, if you don't have the time to do an hour or two, what's your fallback where you're still doing something so you feel like you've done it and you don't get out of practice? And so he came up with 15 minutes. Yeah. So this way the hurdle becomes smaller. So yes, his goal is to do an hour or two, but even if he does 15 minutes, he's done it.
So would you say that would be a habit or a routine or a ritual for this specific person?
I think for this person right now, it's a routine. It definitely requires a lot of effort to stick to it because it's hard.
Isn't it funny? So Sharon, you mentioned that this person has a goal, and the goal is large chunks, 1 to 2 hours a day. I sometimes find that as a coach, I almost ask the leaders that I'm working with to minimize their goals, or like you say, to have a plan B. An exercise example, if someone's training for an Ironman and they have to get a certain amount in, I sometimes need to ask, what's your minimum? Can you do this instead of as a minimum if it's storming outside, or they usually go when it's storming outside. But if there's something, it's almost funny. Like we're working with high achievement people and they want to be there.
Yes. But I think that can also sometimes get in their way, especially for high achieving people, because they expect a lot of themselves. And so if they don't do the full amounts, they, tend to not bother doing it. If like they can't do all of it, they won't do any of it. And then they feel bad about it and they beat up on themselves. There's not a lot of self-compassion there.
Mhm.
So having that minimum amounts that you suggested, or a plan B if they don't have the either the energy or the time for the full amounts, gives them the opportunity to still make progress towards their big goal, but not be so hard on themselves.
We're going to ask the people who are with us today, type into the comments, what is something that you have started newly, especially in a time of uncertainty during this pandemic, as a habit, routine, or ritual? And please let us know which one you think it is. And Sharon will be the ultimate, the litmus test for which one it is. She will tell you what it is. You won't. I know, obviously, you don't know their real situations. But tell us of a habit, routine, or ritual that you have made that's new to you. That's something that you're actually glad that you've made. Don't tell us about a lousy one. Tell us about a good one.
So by the way, Sonia, I mean, this is my own definition of these three things. I have no idea if it's, universally accepted that this is how you would define a routine, habit, and ritual. It's just how I differentiate them.
Well, and it works for you, and it works when you're speaking about it with your clients.
It at least gives you a way to separate them from each other, to think about it.
What is hard about them when people start? So let's say you have this discussion, even with the person who is working 1 to 2 hours on an exam. What is hard about putting something into habit form as opposed to putting it into long-term goal form?
Are you sort of getting at that people procrastinate?
No, I'm not. I don't know what the answer is. Oh, I have no idea.
So I think it can, we're used to whatever our sort of daily routine is and what we normally do. When you add something in that's new, it's a change. And so it does take some effort and attention and intention on our part to actually do it. And when that happens, procrastination is just so easy to fall back on. And a lot of us do it, like, well, Sharon today doesn't really feel like studying. Sharon tomorrow is going to start that new routine. Yeah. And so it's really common for people to just put things off, which is why I think it's so important to take these big goals and just start really small with something that's so easy you can't imagine not doing it. I mean, quite frankly, that's how I started meditating. I'd read in a book to start with 10 or 20 minutes, and I didn't actually think I could sit still for that long. And so I thought, all right, there's tons of research around meditation and its benefits. I know it's really good for me. It's important for me to do this. What's the smallest amount of time I can commit to doing this every day, where at the end of the day, I can't say, yeah, it's important, but I didn't have time today. And so I started with 2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
And Dan Harris, in his book, Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, which is great, talks about how 1 minute counts. And so I think that gets people into this idea that, oh, I can do this, and it builds self-efficacy. And then you can kind of build on it from there.
Let me give you a comment that somebody is putting in. Avinash is telling us, this is a comment about habits, routines, and rituals. He grew up in India. There are lots of rituals and traditions where people blindly follow, and this can bind you and keep you in the past. But developing new rituals and habits, as you're suggesting, Sharon, is incredibly useful.
Thank you, Avinash. That's a really great point. And I think when it comes to rituals in particular, a lot of people associate rituals with, some kind of spiritual practice. And I think as an adult, I certainly went back and looked at some of those things that were part of my culture growing up and asked myself, is this something that I want to be doing or not? Sort of kind of deconstructing how I was programmed as a kid to decide for myself what I wanted to stick with.
And how did that deconstruction go?
It went well. Some things I decided to continue doing, and other things I decided were not really for me as an adult, But the nice thing about it, when you grow up with those kind of rituals, that you can create routines and habits because you've done it before.
That's true. That's such a great point. It's been in your life, whether they're ones that you have chosen or put on yourself. Yep. Here's a comment from somebody about what they've tried. Anne Marie says, 2 years ago, I added, so like you, Sharon, she added meditation, gratitude journaling, and dedicated prayer time. To help me establish consistency, I tacked it onto my morning workout, which was habitual and non-negotiable. And it became a wonderful routine, which she now classifies as a ritual.
Awesome. So I think to Anne Marie's point, what she's describing is sort of there's a cue, like by tacking it onto something she was already doing, it becomes much easier to incorporate it. And that's a really great way to start a new routine, is if there's something you're already doing, just tack it onto that.
How much can we tack on new habits? How much can we, so if somebody wants to get more physically fit and learn a language and learn the piano and also get more organized in their work, what is that process of tacking on habits? What have you seen work?
So I'm a really big fan of starting small. I'm a big fan of BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits. So he actually recommends starting, 3 things at once, but they're really, really small. So when his book came out at the beginning of the year, I decided to follow through on his challenge with 3 new things. And let me see if I can remember one of them was drinking a glass of water before I had my coffee. One of them was after I get into bed to read at least 1 page in a book. And the third was after my strength training workout to get on the treadmill and run for 1 minute. So, oh, now this is really embarrassing. I'm telling the whole world of what I did. I still read at least 1 page every single night. The strength training, I maybe would do it if I was still strength training during the pandemic. I was really, really good. In fact, the running I started increasing and I got up to about like 22, 23 minutes towards the beginning of the pandemic. But then I realized that it was not great on my joints and I had to abandon the running. But I did stick with it and built it and it was great. And then the third one, the water, I still do mostly, maybe not a whole glass, but I definitely drink some water. And with him, he suggests starting tiny. So I have met that because the tiny that I started with was like 1 ounce or 2 of water, although my goal was to get to 8 ounces.
Wow, you really took his tiny habits idea, 1 ounce or 2 of water, just a little before coffee, just to get that habit.
Right.
I actually haven't heard people do that with water. They usually fill up their jug, they put it at their desk table. That's really cool.
Yeah. So the idea with him was to link it to something you're already doing. And it's like a little recipe. So, I mean, I happen to drink a lot of water, but I thought maybe it would help me cut down on the coffee consumption if I filled my body with some water first. So
let me give you a specific comment from one person. Oh, this is here, we're going to rise above it. Avinash says, one ritual he's developed over the last few months, this is exactly what we're talking about, is during the time of uncertainty, is having a document which contains your long-term and short-term goals and weekly plans to achieve those. You're updating it every Monday, reviewing it on Tuesday, and updating the plan for the next weeks. This has been very helpful, and you've achieved a lot more because of this over the last 3 months than last year. You need a lot of effort to do it, so it's still a ritual you're working on. Neat.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.
And at the same time, I actually, just one more comment about Avinash's goal. It seems like this habit is very step oriented. He does this on Monday, he reviews it on Tuesday, he updates the plan. It almost seems like a new process that's full of little steps.
Right. It's, I think about something like that the way I would think about trying to get a pot of water to boil, right? You can't turn the flame up super high for a couple of minutes and then turn it off and ignore it and then turn it up super high. So what Avinash is doing is he is keeping it on a low flame and consistently paying attention to it. And I think because of that, as he said, in 3 months' time, he did more than he did the prior year, right? And it's our tendency to say, oh, I'll do all of that later, and we'll leave a full day for reflection. But maybe it's better to reflect a little bit each day or once a week with more regularity.
I'm really liking your analogy of just keeping that fire going, or just what do you do to keep it a little bit going, as opposed to woof, 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 which is a little bit of the more, less, more. Let's just jump into something, then come back down. But you're saying, like, let's walk up that mountain step by step. Let's keep that fire warm.
I think it works better. And of course, there's no one size fits all approach to this, right? Some people, they like to just really dive in and give something their full attention for a very long period of time. And it works for them, which is great. But what I will say is, for people who have big goals that they find they're not achieving, the idea of breaking it down into smaller goals and little steps to get there can be really helpful.
As we end, Sharon, what is something that you want to share with our viewers as we're sort of wrapping and thinking about habits, routines, and rituals?
So just to take a little time to look at your own routines, particularly in the morning and the evening, and maybe identify one small thing that you can add that would be helpful for you. If you're having trouble turning off from work at night, what could you do that would signal to your brain that this is now the end of the workday? And really, really small, just start small.
Plan. So it sounds like plan for maybe the morning and the afternoon or evening routine, and start small with whatever you're planning.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. This has been Sharon Danzger talking to us about the magic of habits, routines, and rituals. Thanks a ton, Shannon.
Thank